be a panelist.
All right, we're good to go? Let's start then. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the, guys, you gotta turn your,
Good.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Medfield Board of Selectmen for Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. The meeting is hereby called to order. As always, our meetings are being video recorded, and I ask that we begin by taking a moment of appreciation for our troops serving around the globe in defense of our country, and in particular those who are at risk at the moment, protecting Americans and others who are evacuating from Afghanistan. Thank you. Relatively light agenda tonight. It's always a dangerous statement to make, but it is a relatively light agenda. Town Administrator Christine Truweiler is delivering one of her children to college, so she's not with us. But Assistant Town Administrator Nick Milano will be filling in ably, no doubt.
No pressure.
Our first item, we don't have any appointments. Our first item is a discussion of the Medfield State Hospital process. So let us discuss the Medfield State Hospital process, shall we? Gus,
Want me to
would
start?
you like to
Yeah,
begin
sure.
as the Development Committee representative?
So that we've received, I think most people seem to be aware, we've received two proposals, one from Trinity Financial and one from Pulte Homes. The basic process we're going through right now is the Development Committee is going through a preliminary review of those two proposals. The main issue before the Development Committee to start with is whether we would like to interview both of the developers. And given that I've already received invitations for our interview meetings, we have decided we'll interview both developers. And those interviews are taking place next week. I think both of them take place next week. Sarah's in the back of the room here, so I can get the nodding confirmations. There's really three groups, I guess you could say, that are looking at these proposals. There's the Development Committee, which will be the ones that will ultimately be making the recommendation on which developer, if either, is the developer that we think we should go ahead with in exploring, trying to reach an agreement. There are a number of special interest groups, I guess you could say. The various historical commissions and committees are also reviewing this. The Energy Committee is reviewing it, and I'm leaving one out. Cultural Alliance is leaving, they're all looking at it, and they have a particular perspective. So the process will be that we've done a preliminary review, we'll be conducting the interviews, those special groups will be officially giving us their feedback on the developers. In the meantime, members of the public are free to take a look at those proposals. There's a mechanism to capture any questions. In fact, for anyone who is interested, you should get your comments in of any questions you'd like asked before the interviews that are going to take place next week. So what we're going to try to do is take the questions that the Development Committee has, take questions that might come in from the special committees that are reviewing this, and also taking a look at the questions or comments coming in from the public. And we will be working to integrate all of those into the discussions that we have next week with the two developers. From there, we'll go into a final stage of going through final selection of, if any, again, of a recommendation. We'll be making that recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. Assuming that that is accepted, then that will be going before, then the specific issue that goes before the public at, or what we anticipate to be a special town meeting in the fall, is an approval of the land disposition. So the legal actions of the taxpayers are to authorize the Board of Selectmen to dispose of the land by selling it or otherwise leasing it to the developer that we are recommending. As a practical matter, the public will know what that recommendation is. They'll have access to the two proposals to come to their own conclusions about that. If they're comfortable with all that, then we would hope that they would go ahead and approve the disposition of the land so that we can move ahead with the contract.
I mean, is it the current intention of the Development Committee to simply advance one of these proposals as is to the board, or do you anticipate a negotiation period with a selected developer to kind of finalize what the proposal will be that will be presented to town meeting?
So there is a effectively, it's being called a best and final stage. So if we have a developer that we think is in the right ballpark, there will be a further stage for what's being referred to as a best and final, which would be an opportunity for the developer to modify the proposal based on the inputs that we give.
And guess what's the intention as to who's going to negotiate that on the town side?
It would be the development committee.
Okay.
We're being supported with Peregrine Consulting, so we have some people that have experience in doing this. Sarah is also involved, and Nick is involved, so, but basically, this will be a direct negotiation
Okay.
with the development committee. And then at that point, if there's an approval for the disposition, similar to what we're seeing with the South Hinckley, we then have to go through a process of actually negotiating the contract and getting to a final agreement to work through the transaction.
So as a select board member, I would like to have some impact on that negotiation, if that's possible.
Beyond your role, I mean, the recommendation comes to the select board, so in what capacity and what kind of impact?
Well, there's certain items that I would like to see if we can tweak on behalf of the town. There's
So-
things that I'd like to change, and so that I'd like to talk to the developer about that and see what we can do. There's certain concerns that I have. I mean, one of the proposals has $1,250,000 going to a non-town group. I'm not sure that that's even legally permissible.
Well, so the short answer is you're a member of the Board of Selectmen, so there's a recommendation that's going to come to the three of us, and we're going to have an opportunity to do that.
Okay. Well, just understand that I would like to have some impact on the negotiations, and if you want me to get involved earlier, I'm happy to do that, whatever the Development Committee thinks is the appropriate way for the Select Board to get involved in that, but I do have interests and thoughts.
So first point, the two of you obviously can do whatever, whatever you would like to be doing on the select board if we have an agreement on it. The part I'm not really resisting the issues you want to raise. The thing that I think I need to understand a little better, when you say I would like to be in the negotiation with the developers, I don't think that's how we've set this up. I think I'm on the development committee, and the development committee has been asked to do that. But on the other hand, the development committee is acting on behalf of the select board. So if you're saying I'd like to have inputs, that I'd like to have my voice heard and considered by the development committee, I get that. If you're saying I want to be a negotiator, I don't get that. So it's more trying to understand what you're trying to do there, Pete.
Well, I have involvement for years, and I have talked to people that have issues with the current proposals. I have issues with the current proposals, and so that I want to raise those issues at some point in time.
Well, yeah, you can certainly do that.
Whether it's the development committee negotiating a final product that then comes to the select board, and then the select board again has another round of negotiation with the developer, or
Yeah, it seems to me, I think that the prudent course here is we're going to have a period of public discussion, of review by the development committee, and a recommendation to the development committee, from the development committee to the Board of Selectmen. The question is, and I think to Pete's point, should we have a discussion between the Board of Selectmen and the development committee before that recommendation is made? In other words,
I mean, I think
to
that,
get
yeah, I mean, I think
feedback
that.
that we have, because, and I'm in a similar position to Pete, in that depending on which of the two options is preferred, there's a series of things questions and concerns that I have about each of them that are different. I think there are things that both proposals raise that might productively be discussed and negotiated with the other one, and to understand in the interim what would happen. And so I think we ought to build into the process both the public input piece of this, and then also the opportunity, since we're ultimately going to have to vote on the recommendation as to whether to advance it to a town meeting or just to say no. Before the development committee negotiates what is you view as a final agreement, that we have a discussion. And frankly, I don't want to have that until there's been some public input and discussion and the interviews and all the rest of it, so I can kind of digest that, but build that into the process to give you all some feedback from us,
Yeah.
about what our priorities are based on what we've heard, or which way we're gonna go. Because I could see, depending what's feasible, depending what the answers are to some of those questions, I could see going either way. And so I think some of the strategy is gonna depend on what, some of those specifics, what's feasible within each of the two columns, because they're very different proposals. obviously.
Right. So the short answer, I think, to what you're saying here is the Development Committee's job is to come to the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation. I hear one piece here that says, well, before the Development Committee comes with its formal recommendation, we would like to have the Development Committee come and have a joint discussion with the Board of Selectmen. I won't speak officially for the Development Committee without them having a say, but I am like 95% certain the Development Committee would be more than happy to have a meeting before any official recommendation with the Board of Selectmen to both share the thinking of the Development Committee and to get the thinking of the Board of Selectmen. So if that's an issue you're looking for, I don't think that's at all controversial. I will say from a process standpoint, in the earlier meetings that we've had, the one, at least at this stage in the process, the one thing the Development Committee had kind of decided it would do is we have two proposals from two developers, and we are evaluating those proposals on the merits of each one of those proposals. There was a question that came up early when these first came up. Well, gee, it would be really nice if we could take this piece from that one and this one from that one, and we could craft them together, and then we could get an even better proposal for what we want. That may be a useful observation at some point in time when we finish the straight-up evaluations of the two proposals. But the intention at this early stage, I think, of the Development Committee is not to get into some sort of tailoring of two proposals that we haven't really even evaluated yet on their own merits, to try to craft some sort of a synthesized proposal between the two. And from a process standpoint, I think we're trying to evaluate them straight up right now. When we know where we come out on that, then, and we have the feedback, and we have your feedback, I think then the discussions that go from there to get us to a point where we're comfortable bringing a recommendation forward to the town for a vote. As I said, the Development Committee is recommending something to the Board of Selectmen, so it kind of goes as a given that the Board of Selectmen are going to have to be on board with this before the committee is going to run off and do things on its own.
And who do you see, Gus, doing the evaluation of the impact on the town, the cost modeling and all of that? Obviously, there's differences in the proposals from the existing cost model that was developed by the Master Planning Committee and has been used in part, at least considered by the Warrant Committee. There's differences in those proposals from the cost standpoint. Who do you see kind of trying to true up those cost models to decide, okay, this is the cost model we as the town think is the most accurate, and this is the model we're going to use to evaluate this proposal?
So I see Sarah raising her hand, which maybe she's volunteering, but I'd also point out Pat Casey. One of the reasons we put Pat Casey on this committee was to bring the knowledge of the cost model that we had to start with into this. So, Sarah, you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we actually have some specialists on our Peregrine team that are able to speak to the financials, traffic impact, and we also have communications professional on the team.
So I'm not sure if that was what you were asking or if who it was on behalf of the town. But
That is what I'm asking.
Okay.
And then the second part of that is, will they also, and this I don't think they'll be doing, will they also be evaluating the impact of the, apart from the usual, like how many students there's going to be, what their property taxes? I mean, at least with one of the proposals, there's a substantial amount of money involved, right? And so are they also going to do the modeling of what is the, what will that money be used for? What costs will be covered by that money that would otherwise be paid in taxes? By how much will taxes go down if that is, I mean, I think there's a longer term modeling which is going to require some assumptions about how the money would be spent. And I think that we probably ought to be involved in developing those assumptions. I think for the proposal that's got a smaller amount of money involved, it's not as significant an issue. It's more by comparison. But for the larger amounts of money, we'll need to understand, okay, which pieces of the budget will now be covered by this amount for what period of time, and that. Are they also gonna do that, or is that going to be?
I think
something we're gonna
it's
have to do?
premature, Mike. The first issue is whether both proposals are sufficiently responsive to what the requirements of the town are. So this is not a cost competition. If, at the point that we have an option and there's costs associated with it, yeah, there would, and there's also gonna have to be modeling on how the split on that goes, because whatever the money is that might come in actually is plus or minus half ours and half the state's as things stand right now. So if we get that far along and we think we're going to do something and we think that there's viable, one or more viable options, I think, yeah, that for sure has to happen.
Because we have to evaluate not just the proposals in isolation, we have to evaluate the impact of the proposals on the town generally, both pluses and minuses. And so I don't-
The sharing, the 50% share that we're supposed to have with the state under the land disposition agreement that we agreed to when we bought it is one of the issues that I'm focused on. And my goal is to have the purchase price be as low as possible, but to try to get the benefits to the town in some other form. So instead of taking an amount of money, see if we can't take that in some other way that we don't end up having to give half of it to the state.
Bet you the development committee would be happy for your ideas on that, Pete. I don't think
But
we're.
I just want to make sure that this is something that somebody is going to do, because I think it's a fair amount of work, and I think in any of these issues that come up, there's going to be a lot of fighting over the facts and which model is correct and which model is wrong and which projection is right and which is wrong, and which in some cases is driven by the conclusion to which the arguer wants to reach. And so that has been certainly a historical fact with almost any issue. So it would be great if we can get, as best as we can, a consensus on the facts, and so we understand what the trade-offs are. And it sounds like, to a certain extent, the development committee will be working on that. But it
Yeah.
also sounds like for some of that impact, after the recommendation comes out, and this is the concern I have, is that I don't think you can make a recommendation without looking at those broader impacts on the town. I understand the first step is evaluating, do you have a viable proposal or not? If the answer is you only have one viable proposal, then you're essentially evaluating the viable proposal against deferring, the cost of deferring action for now. If you have two viable proposals, then I think you really do have to play out what each of them means on their own terms for the rest of the town. Not necessarily you as in you, Gus Merver, or you as in the development committee, but before we put something on the table to a town meeting and ask them to approve it, I think we'll have to have an answer as to why one was chosen over the other, what were the trade-offs in each of them, what did we give up by choosing A instead of B, and the rest of it. And so, and again, that's a broader, because of the size of the project, that's a little bit of a broader discussion than a focus on what's the best for the site, what's the best development option for the site. It's not as simple as it would be for a private landowner who's just evaluating the impact on that particular location.
So I guess I look at it, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I think I look at the process a little differently right now. Right now, the development committee is at a state, and the question on the table is, we have two proposals. Are 0, 1, or 2 of those proposals, in our view, even viable proposals? And that's largely a function of, are they responsive to what is in the RFP for the requirements, recognizing that those requirements are deliberately written in a way to tell developers what it was we were hoping we would get, but not to get to the point where people thought we had a specification that they had to meet. And I think we've done that. So the first question from the development committee standpoint is, do we have 0, 1, or 2 viable proposals? And that's, I think, the stage that we're at right now. If we get to the point where the development committee has a recommendation for the selectmen, I think that's another stage, which is the development committee getting to a point where it basically says, listen, this is the course of action that we think the town should take. And that's a hurdle that's maybe between now and October, somewhere around there. And then if we get to that, then there's yet another stage that says, well, what do we need to do to satisfy the concerns, issues, interests, opinions, questions of the public, so that when we go to a special town meeting, the public is informed, and however the public votes, we're at least satisfied that they made an informed vote about which way they want to go. So some of what you're talking about there, Mike, I see as actually being farther downstream in terms of addressing the kinds of issues that people raise. If they know what the option is, then they'll have issues around it, whether it's traffic or whatever it is, they'll have issues around it. So I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but I kind of see it almost as a three-phase.
No, all of which is fine.
Yep.
But I think all of that analysis has to come before there's a recommendation. Right? You can't
But-
make a recommendation without looking at the broader impacts on the town.
I think that's not automatically true if the development committee determines one of the proposals is not responsive.
Sure. No, I get it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. The first step is
Yeah.
if we have 0 or 1 viable proposals, then we're just evaluating 0 or 1
Yeah,
proposals.
right.
If we have 2 viable proposals, viable in the sense that they meet the criteria of the RFP, they're physically feasible, they're legal, and all of those things. That to me is the definition of a viable proposal. Then we have to make a choice between the 2 of them. And you have to look at the impact, the overall impact on the town of each proposal and decide, because each has its own merits and demerits, its concerns, whatever it is, and they can be modified. There can be an indication in those interviews from the developers how they might modify their proposals, because the developers may have their own ideas in response to seeing the other proposals, saying this is something we could incorporate, this is something we could change, this is something we're going to do. And I would leave it to the discretion of the development committee from a process standpoint, but I also would not be averse to. I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if after there's public feedback, after there's discussion and input, there was an opportunity for each of the developers to make a further proposal if they want to modify it in light of that.
Each developer to do what, Mike?
Either of them. I know, in other words, there's going to be public feedback. There's going to be discussions. There's going to be questions. There's going to be a process of discussion that may prompt one or both of the developers to modify their proposals.
Let them make their best offer?
And then, right, I mean, I wouldn't want to pick one of the 2 and then have opportunities for revision. I think at any point they could make a revised proposal within that. And so, I don't think it's a matter of picking the best proposal and then addressing the questions that people have. I think it's a matter of identifying what is the best proposal in light of the overall benefits and harms to the town collectively, in addition to the various constituencies with a particular interest in the hospital.
So, couple things. First off, right now, the public's questions are questions that are going to inform our interviews with both developers. So there's one set of questions from the public that we presumably will be getting in or are getting in right now that we'll incorporate into the interviews that we have with the 2 developers. If we get, I think what I hear you saying is, well, gee, the development committee if the development committee were to come into the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation, they shouldn't expect that the selectmen will accept that recommendation in the absence of some cost analysis that helps kind of give us some parameters here. There are 2 proposals. One of them, the money is better, the responsiveness to the strategic plan, the master plan for the state hospital it's not a match. And the other one is a closer match to the state hospital, but the money's not there. So we have a choice between going for the money or potentially going for the money or potentially going for what we said we wanted in the master plan. And they're not just
But the development, it's what the master planning committee said they wanted in the master plan.
No,
We as a town
it's-
have never adopted the master plan.
Well, I'm not sure how to take that comment, Mike.
So we've adopted a zoning bylaw.
We just, yeah.
We've adopted zoning that came out of the master plan. I mean, we've talked about this before, Mike, and if you're saying the master plan is not a specification, I agree. If you're saying the master plan doesn't mean anything, I don't agree.
No, I'm not saying
So,
that.
I know.
I'm not saying
So what I'm getting at is there's one proposal that you can find the sentiments and the priorities of the master plan in that proposal. There's another proposal that you can find a lot of money to not have to, it's a test. It's like, all right, how about if you got a lot of money, are you serious about the master plan you spent 5 years developing? I think it's a good test for the town. My point is that before we get to a recommendation, I think what I hear you saying is the selectmen need to hear that somebody has kind of played those numbers out, and we kind of have quantified those, not just simply at some sort of a broad general statement, so that if we decide to go down path A, we know what it is we didn't get for going down path B. If we go down path B, we know what we're giving up that maybe we got on path A. I
Correct.
totally agree
Yeah,
with
I mean,
that.
to put
Yeah.
both of the proposals through, again, assuming they pass the initial test, right? Both proposals go through the same model, and we play out, here's what the overall impacts are. The tax impact, the impact on cost, the impact on this, the impact on traffic, all the different parameters, here's what they are, right? And then we're understanding that we're picking one of two packages that they do have very different impacts in the town, they have very different impacts on the site, they're different, and in that sense, we will have a clearer choice as the process plays out. And again, I'm not prejudging the substance of this. I just want to make sure that we are keeping in mind, an open mind and an assessment of the overall impact of the town, because there's always the third option, even if both of them qualify, there's always the option to say no to both of them, right, ultimately. I suspect that ultimately that we will make a recommendation and give the choice to the town meeting to decide whether to say no to whatever the final recommendation is. But we should know, and the people should know what the process was and what the factors were that led to the conclusion and what we're saying no to, right, and what we're saying yes to, what was feasible, all that's all I'm saying. And just from a timing standpoint, I think it's ambitious to try to do it in the fall. I've kind of had in my mind like January, that if we targeted kind of going through this process to have a special town meeting in January is more realistic. That's kind of my.
Yeah. I think we have a couple things. Right now, the schedule for the Development Committee is a special town meeting in the fall.
2 weeks
and so we're
after
kind of-
another special town meeting in the fall?
Well, and I mean, those are all considered. I mean, I don't want to say, oh, no, let's go January, because for all you know, we're going to be having more special town meetings than that. I can say that right now, the plan that the Development Committee is working to is to get to the special town meeting in the fall. And if there's, so I don't think there's any harm for the Development Committee to work to that.
No.
If we have either public controversy, or if the two of you aren't satisfied with the recommendation to move ahead, then that could push it to January. Or I find every time we say a special town meeting in January, we never have a special town meeting in January. So I'm a little skeptical of that, but right now, the plan is to try to get this done by the fall. If we get into the fall and we realize that it's more complex, then that is what it is. So I wouldn't recommend that we change the Development Committee's schedule
No,
at this
I'm
point.
not either, right.
But I think we're also, it's a big deal. It's a big project, so we're not going to just ram it through for the sake of ramming it through either.
Right, no, I understand.
Okay. Did I answer the questions for? Okay.
If I could just throw out the specifics on, so the interviews, Trinity will be interviewed Monday, August 23rd at 7 p.m. Pulte will be interviewed Thursday, August 26th at 7 p.m. Both of those will be public broadcast on Zoom. The information to watch those will be on the town website. In addition, we've posted a Google form to submit questions if you want to have any questions potentially considered for the interviews. And we are soliciting public comments that will be submitted to the Development Committee. We ask that public comments come in by September 3rd, and that questions come in by Monday, August 23rd at noon. So all that's on the town website, right on the homepage, and you can find everything there that you want to submit any questions or any comments to.
Okay. And let me loop back to Pete. Pete, in this discussion and this process, did that address what you raised?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. It's important, I think, that the select board have an opportunity to weigh in before it's
Right.
set up
and-
in a firm, unchanging position, so.
And as I said, I think the Development Committee will be more than happy to, if sometimes you get recommendations committees, and sometimes you have committees that come in first before the recommendation. Sounds to me like that's what the Development Committee should be expecting that we'll be doing before issuance of a formal recommendation. And I think they'll be happy to do that.
And hopefully that could be done in an executive section, Mark, could it? Land acquisition or land sale?
It's probably,
I mean, certainly the portions
If they're not-
discussing the negotiations
For
with the
no other
developer.
reason, it's the valuation. It says valuation of land. So it's actually, I don't know that it deals with disposition of land per se, but the language is, I actually looked at it yesterday in that context.
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point, we will have to have an executive session to talk about negotiations. If there's gonna be negotiation, we'll have to develop our negotiating strategy and do that, in an executive session, so as not to hurt the town's bargaining position in that process. There's gotta be a public component to it, of course, as well. And some of this depends on how the first step of the process plays out, so I don't wanna prejudge the rest of the process, but I agree with Pete, I think we should have a substantive discussion about the proposals, assuming there are two proposals to discuss, before you make a recommendation.
So Mark, let me push you a little bit on, because I want to be sure I understand where the lines on what get drawn where. The evaluations that the members of the committee are doing right now of the two proposals, the Peregrine has put out an email with we're using a matrix and, criteria. And Peregrine had indicated that and each one of us is individually doing a preliminary review on the committee. We're sending that preliminary review to Peregrine. And interestingly, Peregrine in their email said all of those materials are public information. I had a separate conversation with Todd Trebenko last week about the process and what we were going to do, and he said, gee, everything's public. And I said, that doesn't make sense to me, that everything, I understand once everybody sees the evaluations, everybody on the committee is public. So if the committee starts to share evaluations, that's a public process, but it didn't automatically make sense to me that the individual evaluations that go to the consultant that's working with us, the model I was using was performance evaluations, where the compiled evaluation is public, but the individual evaluations are not. So that's,
Well, that's changed.
well, for better or worse, that's
Yeah,
where I was
model.
coming from. So my point is that we have individual committee members that are doing preliminary evaluations, and they're sending them directly to Peregrine, not to each other. My view on that was at that point in time, when they have not yet been shared within the committee, they would not be public information because they haven't been shared in a meeting. And once at the point the committee comes together and takes a look at all that stuff, it would be public information. Now, the reason I'm asking that question is if that's not right, and even those very preliminary evaluations are public, I don't understand how we can have an executive session to talk about evaluations.
So I guess what I would ask is that we try to structure it in some way where all of this can be not public information until we get a deal.
I don't think you can. 'cause-
It's difficult, if not impossible, and it's not like we as municipal attorneys haven't been pushing back with the state for years about the fact that we needed more protection than is presently in the law. But the legislature, in its wisdom, has chosen to disregard those concerns. So, for instance, you don't have the litigation strategy analogy available to you. The real estate one may, if anything, provide some assistance. But basically, if you're in a negotiation with, whether it's a real estate negotiation, it's a contract negotiation, whatever it is, there is no exemption for that in the open meeting law. Now, the separate thing here, which is kind of overlapping, is public records law. There is an exception in public records law if you're working on something as a policy type thing and it hasn't been finalized yet. You don't have to release it until it is. So that's okay, but again, once you start disseminating among members, then you lose protection that you might otherwise have. So I'm sorry, I'm just the message bearer here, but it's not favorable.
So let me try, see if I'm getting anywhere. The evaluation process itself cannot be closed. And that, even though I probably would like it to be, I can understand why when a piece of public property is under evaluation for potential disposition and you're looking at different proposers, I can and the proposals themselves are public, in a public record. I can see why the deliberations of the evaluators would also, at least at some point in time, become public. When we get to the point where we have someone designated for the contract, and we're in the LDA process, similar to what we did with Hinckley South, we had a competitive proposal. You all, I assume, had an open evaluation. And then when we knew who we were trying to negotiate with, we had closed meetings. So the LDA part would be clear to me, that could be closed. The evaluation part, not so much.
No, it wasn't. That was only because there were not the critical numbers involved in those. You delegated to people, and that's how you get around what otherwise would be the obligation to do it completely in the open.
Okay. Well, there goes that theory.
And, you know, I absolutely understand a sense of frustration. I've dealt with this for 20 years. It's just, the legislature just doesn't care. They don't see it as important enough. I think it's very important. It's very prejudicial. I mean, even when we were negotiating with the state, DCAM, that was adversarial proceeding for all intents and purposes, and yet it had to be conducted in the open.
Can the Board of Selectmen, as a Board of Selectmen, have a closed, I'm trying to picture, Development Committee has filed a recommendation with the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen are deliberating whether or not to approve that recommendation. The Board of Selectmen, recognizing I'm on the Development Committee, I'm on the Board of Selectmen, but the Board of Selectmen, before deciding where they conclude, could there be an executive session just of the Board of Selectmen to talk about the Board of Selectmen's viewpoint of this disposition of land? Or would I have to not be there?
If you can pigeonhole yourself into an exemption for executive session, it doesn't matter that it's just the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Selectmen and another town board that has an interest in it. It's whether the exemption exists to begin with,
Well-
a recognized exemption for purposes of negotiating strategy with respect to a third party.
Well, so land disposition would be one of them.
It's not, that's not what, the exemption doesn't say land disposition.
And bring my book up.
Frankly, it's frankly worded in terms of purchase acquisition, but it also says or value. And that's the catch-all at the end, because value is involved here, and as far as I'm concerned, if value is involved, it's in the exemption, that's a legitimate basis for having an executive session.
So it sounds like we could, get to an executive session with a properly framed agenda.
But I think that from my perspective, the evaluation process is a public process.
Right.
The negotiation process of what we're gonna go back to the developers and ask for, the strategy
Right.
for doing that in valuing the land, and how we value the land, and go back to the developer with our assumption of the value, that we would discuss in executive
Right.
session.
I would think.
We wouldn't have an executive session where we were debating the merits of the two proposals, but in terms of our negotiation strategy and the value placed on the land, that we would do, at least in one executive session to develop that negotiation strategy. But there wouldn't be a situation where the public would be unaware of the factors that went into the valuation,
Right.
or unaware of what was decided. It's
And we'd
more,
be-
we're going back to the developer, and this is what we're gonna go back with.
And we could invite the Development Committee to that executive session if we were so inclined.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Anything else?
I don't have
Pete,
any.
anything else?
I don't think so.
Mark, Nick, Sarah? All right. All right, next one, vote to approve the sandwich board policy. Any further comments on the sandwich board policy that was in this is our codification, the summer of codification of unwritten policies. Yes, Mark?
Just as a reminder, there is a town bylaw that prohibits any posting of signs within the sidewalk or the public way, whatever, with the exceptions, and this is basically just fleshing out the exceptions.
Right. And it's really, this is what we've kind of always done. It's a
Right.
matter of, it wasn't written down someplace, and so if somebody had to know somebody to ask the right question as to what the policy was, now you can go on our
Right.
website and see what the policy is. So any other further comments on this?
No?
I got a motion to approve the sandwich board policy.
I move that we approve the sandwich board policy.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye, opposed? None. All right. Next, the car wash fundraiser policy. This is a relatively new policy. The popularity of the car wash fundraisers and the inability of the calendar to accommodate all of them has led to the creation of the car wash fundraiser policy. Any further comments or questions on this one?
No.
No.
All right, we have a motion to approve the car wash fundraiser policy.
I move that we approve the car wash fundraiser policy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? I'm gonna move the two, no, so Pete, so you don't have to get up. I think we should move the two Hinckley South things just to the end, so Pete doesn't have to get up. That we can go through the rest of these. Is that okay with you, Pete?
That's fine. Thank you.
So the next one is a vote to appoint the following members to the Board of Selectmen Name Change Committee and adopt the committee charter. I have comments on the charter that I want to provide to Christina. I don't know if you have comments on the charter as well.
I thought it was okay, so.
Okay, you thought it was okay? All right, I just had a couple. You thought it was fine as is?
It was so brief and it covered the 3 points, so I thought it was fine, but
Okay.
I trust your judgment.
No, my
Okay.
comment was just gonna be, the two, I had just a couple of comments on, I mean, it's really not a recommendation whether we should change our name, the recommendation is whether the town meeting should vote for a charter to change the name. Because we don't have the unilateral power to do that ourselves. And then I was gonna adopt your language to say, instead of saying to reflect greater inclusivity, just to reflect changing language, changing use of language, to make it broader than that, because,
Well, yeah, I think that's a good change, but.
yeah, so I would just have those two changes. Pete, do you have any issues with those changes?
Tell me again. I was just looking for,
It would just revise it to say, instead of recommending whether the Board of Selectmen should change. the
oh, that it's a
name to-
town meeting?
Town meeting
That's
should,
fine, sure,
and
of course.
To just broaden it from inclusivity to reflect changing use of language.
Just for clarification, so the town meeting actually makes a recommendation to the voters who
Right.
then vote at the ballot.
Right, basically, it's to change the charter to be consistent with the process. As written, it suggests that, to recommend whether we'll just change our name unilaterally, which we can't do. And the other is to broaden it from inclusivity to reflect changing use of language.
That's fine with me. The other thing that struck me was, I wasn't going to bring it up, but it says to determine if a name change is necessary. It's not really necessary. It's a question of whether or not it's desirable
Or advisable.
or advisable, yeah.
Advisable, yeah.
So let's make those three changes from to advisable, and we can adopt the charter as amended, and we can just type it up. And that way, we don't have to have this on again. So we can have, Gus, can we have a motion to adopt the charter as revised with the three changes we've discussed?
I move that we adopt the Board of Selectmen Name Change Committee Charter as revised.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye, opposed? No. All right, and now we have a request to appoint members to to that committee. Any discussion of any of the proposed candidates?
I thought they were good last week,
All
still
right,
good.
so we have a motion to appoint the members. You should probably name them all.
Yeah, I will. I move that we appoint Nate Bazinet, Ann Thompson, Richard DeSorger, Alex Mader, Teresa Knapp, Enos, Julia Maviglia, and Suzanne Newark to the Board of Selectmen Name Change Committee.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
You
We
want to
just mentioned
designate a
that-
chair for purposes of calling the first meeting?
I should, I would entertain a motion to since he's here, to designate Nate Bazinet as the chair to organize and call the first meeting.
And he doesn't object, so we're
All right.
golden.
Well, we don't know if he objects, but it's too late. So here we go.
So, I move
Thumbs
that-
up, we're good.
I move that we appoint Nate Bazinet as the chair for the Board of Selectmen Name Change Committee for the first meeting
To organize the first
to
meeting.
organize the committee.
A second,
All in favor?
Aye.
yes.
And then the committee can elect their own chair.
Yep,
Right.
yep.
All right, next is a.
Thanks for showing up,
Thank you,
Nate.
Nate. Request a vote to appoint Craig McGarry to the Safety Committee.
I move, yes,
Yeah.
good.
No discussion.
But again, I thought he was a good candidate, but
Yeah.
no discussion. Okay, I move that we appoint Craig McGarry to the Safety Committee.
Second,
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Opposed? Now we have a request from Chief Michelle Garrett to extend a conditional offer of employment to Joseph Scherbertes for the position of police officer pending successful completion of the background and medical requirements.
Ready? Okay, I move that we extend a conditional offer of employment to Joseph Schabertes for the position of police officer pending successful completion of the background check and medical requirements.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right.
So Joe was the recipient of the kindness scholarship that the Angel Run originally raised to commemorate the young woman who died in, I think, third grade. And I had the good fortune to be asked to help evaluate the candidates for the scholarships, and it was just wonderful to find out that Joe was this person who everybody regarded as one of the kindest peoples in the high school.
Excellent. That's great. You have a motion?
Just moved it.
We just,
Oh.
I was gonna
Did we already
say- I was
vote?
gonna say.
We did.
Thought you
All right,
did.
okay.
Yeah, we did. I wrote down approved.
All right, there we go.
Wait a
Next,
minute.
vote to sign the Bike to the Beach event notification form for the charity bike ride on September 18th, 2021.
I move that we sign the Bike to Beach event notification form for the charity bike ride on 9/18/2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Our consent agenda, the Medfield Lions request a beer and wine permit for the meeting on Wednesday, September 1st, with a rain date of September 8th. The Norfolk Hunt Club requests a beer and wine permit for the biannual Grounds for Celebration fundraiser on September 11th, 2021, from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And the Coolidge Corner Theater requests the use of the MSH property for the following dates: Friday and Saturday, September 17th and 18th, and Friday and Saturday, October 15th and 16th.
I have an issue with number 3.
Or number 12.
Number 12, the third item on the consent agenda, which is number 12.
Okay.
When Coolidge Corner presented Shutter Island at the State Hospital, there was some sensitivity around the nature of the movie and where it was being presented. And we basically said, no, this is, the significance is this is where they filmed it. And we pushed that through. And ordinarily, I'm not excessively sensitive to people's concerns about how the hospital is connected with the movie. I have to admit, I hung up on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think that's a poor choice of a movie. There's no connection to the state hospital, and the connections that are there because of the nature of the movie are ones that I think are not the right connections.
Right. So I would concur with that.
I would agree, too.
So why don't we approve the, and this was one that hadn't come up before. I mean, I think Christine had raised the Night of the Living Dead and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for October 15th and 16th. We can approve that. I have no objection if the Coolidge Corner Theater wants to come back with a different movie for the 17th and the 18th. So I don't have an objection to the dates.
No.
I think it's just the subject matter. So how about we have a motion to approve the Lions and the Norfolk Hunt Club, and then you can move to approve the
Okay.
15th and the 16th.
I move that we approve the Medfield Lions request for a beer and wine permit.
Currently, you're meeting next week, why don't you just hold the,
The Coolidge Corner thing off for a
Corner
week.
and
Okay. Yeah,
have a
that's.
chance to talk to them and bring it back.
Okay,
Yeah,
for
that's
both
fine.
of them?
That's-
What?
Yeah, because
Both moves, okay.
it's not.
All right,
they get
we'll
to-
Doing the
defer
whole
that,
thing at
yeah.
one time with an understanding.
That's fine. So I move that we approve the Medfield Lions request for a beer and wine permit for Wednesday, September 1st, with a rain date of September 8th, and the Norfolk Hunt Club request for a beer and wine permit for the biannual Grounds for Celebration fundraiser on September 11th, 2021, from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
And table the other one till next week.
I'll table the other ones next week. All right, meeting minutes. I gave Christine some editorial comments on a few of these, nothing significant. Where are we on the meeting minutes?
I had, I don't know if she forwarded my email to you or not.
I don't have the document.
So
in front of me.
I had one set of minutes that I had major questions on, and the other sets of minutes, there were 2 that were okay as written. The other 2 were strictly typographical issues, and so I sent a bunch of those, and of those, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that they were not just typographical, like the words were spelled wrong. There was a sentence I didn't understand what it meant to say, so I put a comment in to say that I didn't really know what the sentence was trying to say, so I couldn't rewrite it. None of those comments were significant around the substance. You know, they didn't change the whole thing. It's just, I didn't know what this one sentence was trying to say. So from my standpoint, the only meeting minutes that I would like to talk about are the October 6th, 2020 minutes. That has to do with the rail trail lease and how it was reported there.
Okay.
The rest of them were all fine, recognizing that actually most of them I had typos that I forwarded to Christine.
Yeah, I had some similar.
Okay, but I would say none of those typos are substantive, so
So
I
do you
was
want to
happy.
move, Pete, do you have anything on any of these?
I had some typos. Your name was misspelled in one place. There was new ecology wasn't noted correctly.
Yeah, I caught that one. That one went in.
The earmark wasn't quite right, the way it was stated. and,
Earmark.
Let's see. Community choice aggregation. I had some word changes there. I think I gave all of these to Chris already. I'll give them to Nick with the hard copies. Let's see, they would, this is under community choice aggregation, they would open this up to the community and would include the energy manner once, and then it says once then have one. So it should say once the town has one instead. So it's just, it's nothing that's substantive.
So personally, I'm comfortable approving the meeting minutes as amendments have been, are
Except for
submitted.
October 6th.
Except, well, let me, if you want to talk about October
Sure.
6th
Yeah,
first, and
let me
then.
pull up
cut-
the October 6th minutes.
I was also to pull things up, and my screen went screwy, and I can't get down to the thing. The issue on October 6th, 2020 was the discussion around the rail trail lease and the environmental liability indemnification. And the problem is, I don't know if this was an early discussion, and then we had a subsequent discussion at a later meeting. So I know where we came out, and what I read and how that was described didn't quite fit the bill. So maybe, Mark, you can, let me start with you while Mike's looking for the minutes. My understanding, my initial hang-up on the rail trail lease was the unqualified indemnification that we were providing to the MBTA for 99 years on past, present, and future environmental liability. I found that, I didn't think it was in the best interest of the town to accept that kind of an open-ended liability, particularly for the past stuff. I don't mind being responsible for what we do, but for what the MBTA has done, I had a problem with that. My understanding was that if we took out 5 years of the environmental liability insurance to cover the period when we might be reasonably involved in construction and getting the rail trail up and running, that if we did that, the state waived its requirement for the unlimited indemnification past that period of time. So that clause that I was objecting to would go away if we carried the liability insurance. That was,
I don't think they ever waived it. I think it became as a practical matter, quote unquote, once the work was done that disturbed the site without anything coming to the fore, then we were probably safe moving forward.
that was,
I don't
but
believe
we still
that
have,
they-
we still have the
Insurance
liability.
requirements, there's still liability, there's still indemnity. It's all the one-sided stuff
That
that he
was-
has.
Not my understanding in the discussion when I changed my position, I can tell you that. What I heard was the state agreed if we took out 5 years of environmental liability insurance, that we would have, their concern had to do with what damage we might do during the time we were constructing the trail. And after that, that unlimited liability went away, if we did the 5 years, which is why I approved it and why I changed my position. So my point is, the October 6th meeting minutes don't say that. So as I was looking back, I was saying, this does not reflect my understanding of where we came out. What I couldn't remember is if that was the final discussion we had about that, or if that was one of the earlier discussions. Then we subsequently had a meeting where I basically changed my position based on what I had represented to me, at least as I understood it. Is that Pete, Mike? Did you-
Trying to find the minutes. I remember reading it because I think it was a question that I had asked about section 5A versus 5B and the relationship between the indemnity and the and the insurance. I'm just trying to find the October. Oh. It's, no.
So these minutes result of Marion going through tapes, these old minutes.
You have somebody doing them.
What?
You have somebody doing them.
So it's somebody else doing it.
Minutes.
But they listen to, they've watched the tapes and prepared it from the tapes. So it's probably accurate that something took place on a certain date.
Yes, that date is right.
Well, what's in the minutes is exactly what Mark just stated.
I know, what I'm saying is that was not my understanding that led me to change my position. But what I can't remember is whether that was the meeting that we had the final discussion that got me to change my position. So that was October 6th. We may have had subsequent discussions.
But there's a vote here, Gus, that says that we're authorizing Christine on behalf of the select board to sign it.
Okay, that's the meeting then, and that was,
Again, we're protecting.
that was not my understanding of the conversation we had. If that's what's on the video, then I need to pay more attention to what's being said in the meetings, I guess, because that was the sticking point for me all
Cannot
along,
find.
was the liability.
Do you know what day Christine sent these minutes to us?
Do you want to see the minutes?
Yeah, that's probably better than trying to go through here, all right. I definitely read this, $100,000 grant.
You're quoted as saying that it's a modest risk, Mike.
Yeah, no, I remember reading this, because I remember section 5.1A versus 5.1B, I remember reading this. 5.1A.
Yeah, because we did focus on that
Effective
provision
limits the
especially.
extent. Yeah, but I think the difference, Gus, is we're not on the hook for stuff that happened before we owned the property. It's only stuff that we caused under 5. I mean, the way this is written, Town Council Sorrell stated no, because there's a blanket indemnity. They expect the town to indemnify them for anything that happens during the course of the lease that is caused by the municipality.
Well, that includes disturbing something that was
Sure.
already there.
Right.
That's my understanding. What happened was, as I read that, and I read blanket indemnity, I'm sitting there saying, no, that was
No,
why I
so
objected to it.
I think if we do something
Yeah,
that stirs something up,
yeah.
we have to cover them.
That's your reading of those minutes?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm okay. I'm okay.
If
That's good.
something comes
That
up
wasn't
through its
my-
own accord,
Right.
that was before we got it, we're not on the hook
That's
for
the
it.
whole thing I cared
Yes,
about. When
and
I read those minutes, I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's
But I
a,
was reacting to the blanket immunity.
right. In other words, I think Mark's comment is, and this is, I understood it, if we did something so bad that it was in excess of the insurance policy, we'd be on the hook over the excess.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're still on the hook after the period of the insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that after the 5-year period, once it's built, the likelihood of us doing anything that
Right.
stirs up something that we didn't put there, we may still do something that causes damage, but then it would be
Right.
our fault. So I think your
All right.
understanding is
All
correct.
right.
I think the
Okay.
blanket, Mark's reference to blanket indemnity is, because my question was, is our indemnity limited to recovery in the insurance policy? Mark says, no, it's not limited to that. But I think the modest risk that's stated is that once it's built, the likelihood of stirring something up is really low.
The best management practices for the installation requires as little disturbing of the
Yeah,
site as
yeah, no,
possible and just
I-
piling things on top of it.
My reading of the meeting minutes sounded like the blanket immunity was, our indemnity was still there. And it's like, no, I thought we got out from under that now.
Well,
Only if we
during
cause
the
it.
5 years, you are protected by having the insurance place.
And then after that, the trail's there and you're not doing anything to it.
Right, so then you
All
get
right.
into Mike's analysis.
Okay. All right, then I don't have so basically, I'm good with all of the meeting minutes, recognizing there's some administrative amendments and typographical corrections that have been submitted.
Can we get a motion to approve them with incorporating the edits from the three of us that we provided?
I move that we approve all of, I can do this just as a group, all of the meeting minutes. Let me call them out. The April 16th, 2020, May 5th, 2020, June 16th, 2020, June 23rd, 2020, August 11th, 2020, September 22nd, 2020, October 6th, 2020, October 14th, 2020, October 20th, 2020, March 9th, 2021, March 16th, 2021, and June 29th, 2021 meeting minutes as amendments have been submitted by all three of us to Christine.
But not May 25th and June 15th, the new ones.
I'm sorry, and, you're right, and May 25th and May 25th, 2021, and June 15th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Christine will be happy about that. Town administrator updates. Nick?
I don't have anything other than the state hospital interviews and public comment and public questions information that we shared earlier.
Excellent. All right. Our next meeting date is going to be August 24th. Well, we got a lot of meetings coming up. All right. Selectmen reports. Pete?
Could I just confirm one thing, that the second meeting with the warrant committee is Wednesday, September 29th, and not Tuesday, September 28th?
I thought it was Tuesday, September 28th.
I did too. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah. So we'll just check on that. I thought that was September 28th as
Okay.
well, Gus.
Okay.
That was my understanding.
Okay.
All right. Selectmen reports. Pete?
I listened to the Board of Health meeting that was held last week. They were meeting with the superintendent and some people from the school committee. I was very impressed with the quality of the people in the discussion. I think we're doing well with our guidance from the health department and so that's about it for me.
Gus?
Outside of the fact that the preliminary reviews from the development committee are due by tomorrow, so that's about it.
Right. And I was on vacation last week, so I don't have anything to report that is town related.
I would
So-
just mention to anybody that's interested that the proposals to the town for the state hospital are on the website. They're massively different in size, if anybody's interested in taking a look at them.
They're also available in the selectman's office here if you want to come and look at the hard copy. Sometimes it's a little easier to look at them like that.
All right, thank you both. All right, now we'll return to the two Hinckley South documents.
Recuse
And Pete will
myself.
recuse himself. And so I just had one edit on each document, and otherwise I'm prepared to vote to approve them. And it was the same edit with respect to the setbacks and the distances from the property lines. And so what I would change is on page 2, under the description of the project, it currently states, "The parties here to acknowledge that the specific design plans and site plans are not established as of the date hereof. Notwithstanding, the buyer will, to the extent feasible, construct all buildings, roadways, and other improvements with the minimum setbacks from property lines showed on the concept plan dated June 9th. And I would delete "to the extent feasible" and add in, at the end, "and will, to the extent feasible, seek to increase the distance from abutting property lines up to a maximum of 150 feet. And I would make the same change in paragraph 3 of the memorandum of understanding. Because I think we kind of, in our discussions, had the view that the plan as presented, we're not gonna ask to increase it. We're not gonna require an increase, but we wanted to keep the status quo of that proposal. And so I would just alter both of those provisions that way. But otherwise, I did not have any other edits to it. Gus, did you have
I didn't have any, I sent some comments. I think you didn't get to see them because I sent them, because I couldn't send them to you, but I had some comments around specific terms. The one point, and Nick, you got back to me on one, but actually, I must have not deleted one of my earlier comments. The question had to do with, in the waivers, there was waivers having to do with basements, and I first thought was, why do we have waivers on basements? Because we don't have basements, and then I discovered we do have basements. Because if you look at the floor plans, you'll notice that with both floor plans, there are stairs that go down from the first level. So it's not a problem, I would, all things being equal. I assume units with basements are more attractive to people than units without basements. It was just that when you look at the floor plan to start with, you only see the first and maybe second floor, you don't actually see the basement. And then the only question I had on that one was if there are basements. 35 years ago, I had a condo that had a basement, and the only way you could get into that basement was from the stairs going down from the kitchen. I just wasn't sure whether, by any chance, the rules had changed around means of egress from a basement now over 35 years, or whether that still was adequate. There are no bulkheads, or, there's no second means of egress from the basement.
Becomes an issue, I believe,
If you
under the
finish it.
state code if you were gonna put habitable space down there.
Okay.
I don't know, is it intended to be habitable space?
No, I don't believe it is.
It's probably
It
just
hasn't stopped people in the past, but
furnace and all that,
Right.
yeah. All right, so I'm prepared to support both agreements with the edits that I made, and give those to Mark to revise. And so I'm,
specifically, you're agreeable to the 5% deposit,
Mhm.
as well as the other changes that I've negotiated with Attorney Murphy that are reflected in the document.
Yeah, on the point of the deposit, again, there was another comment I made, Mike. I said, all right, well, seeing as it's still here, and so is the limit to the town's recourse in the event of default, I assumed that you were getting a recommendation to go ahead and just concede that point.
Actually, we've tightened up the events of default, so we are getting some benefit
Okay.
from that.
Okay. Quite aside from that, it occurred to me that the amount of time probably between the time that 5% deposit is put down and the full payment is put down, there's nothing that's going to happen to the property until we've actually passed
Right.
the deed. Therefore, as I thought about it, I said, all right, that's kind of, there's not a whole lot that could be a damaging default.
So there's a whole listing of events of default.
Right.
And basically what I said to Murphy is there's two purposes here. There's two general types of default. There's a default that is within your client's control, where he just, for whatever reason, walks away. That's where you would forfeit the deposit. There's a whole bunch of other ones which are not within his control, but would give the town the grounds to terminate the agreement and not just sit there with it in limbo. Some third party or government agency says no, or
Right.
whatever. So that's why we've defined the events of default, and the only situation where the deposit would be at risk would be the
Okay.
situation where it's the developer himself without justification
Mhm.
not performing, so. Cleaned up considerably.
I think there was one typo as well.
Only
I think
one?
the street, well, that I noticed, the street is Boiling Spring, not Bowling Spring.
Well, he added that.
Right. I'm not saying it was your typo, Mark.
I didn't even put that in.
Yeah. It's on
What is-
page 16.
Oh, yeah. He did that. You're absolutely right, it's boiling.
Right.
I hope he got Damon Road right. I have no way of checking that.
Yeah, well,
You bet.
that's on him.
Better.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, interesting, bringing that up, this, neither here nor there for this agreement, but one of the thoughts that I had when I read why he wanted that to be the name and what the background was, it occurred to me, I guess there's no easy way, we have certain street signs in certain corners that we have a plaque up for some Medfield veteran, and that basically says it's this corner and here's the
Right.
person. This case, I think it's just a relative of his who was
Right.
in the Normandy invasion, but you go down development streets, and usually it seems like it's developers name them after their daughters or something, I assume,
Oh,
because they're
absolutely.
almost always, female
Yeah.
names. But it was like, as I was reading first I didn't know why he chose that, but then when he explained, or this explained why, it was like, it's too bad there's not some sort of an informal way to put, this is the name of the street, and it doesn't have to be a full-blown plaque, but something that says, this street has this name because of this. And there's probably there may be a way to do it if we want to
There
push
are,
it.
they're little plaques you can put on the sign. They do them in Franklin.
Is that right? Is that
Yeah.
right? Well, from my standpoint, it doesn't have to be an agreement, but I would certainly not be averse to having that kind of an explanation of the street name if you were so inclined to do
Maybe
that.
that's a good
because
idea. The
Otherwise, nobody
Historical
knows.
Society has a list of names as well for future
Yeah.
streets that,
Yep.
Right, there's committees, yeah, there's a committee for that purpose.
yeah. I know there was some unhappiness with the Chapel Hill development that they didn't pick some of the names from that list. And I think on one of the more recent street names they did, I can't remember which one, but on one of the new street names they picked, maybe even in Medfield Meadows. The street name is one of those with historic significance. So I think that's correct.
Okay.
I apologize to Richard and Company if I'm not, but I think that's correct. So with the two edits that I had, we're
Yep.
good, Gus, and
I'm
get a
good.
move,
Yep,
I'll
I'm good.
move to,
Yep. Okay.
yes, Pete.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
If you get a microphone,
Osler Peterson, 10 Copperwood Road, an abutter of the Hinckley South property. I guess the first thing that I would comment on is in the letter to the Department of Housing and Community Development, it indicates that it was a unanimous vote of the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board supports it unanimously. It's unanimous of the two people that are voting. It's not unanimous of the three members on the Select Board. And so I think that is worded a little incorrectly. I think it would be better to explain that. The second thing is that I would just reiterate that the budding neighbors have said that they would support this proposal if there was a 150-foot buffer between the buildings and the lot line, and that has not been recommended by this board or the Affordable Housing Trust Board. I know, Mr. Marcucci, that you disagreed with me on the purpose of zoning, so I'm bringing you a definition of zoning from a Massachusetts Appeals Court case where it says, quote, "The main purpose of zoning is to stabilize the use of property and to protect an area from deleterious uses." So that basically what is happening here is that density in excess of the zoning at 4 to 5 times the zoning is being put into an existing neighborhood. And the neighbors have said that they would support that if there was a sufficient buffer. Our fellow residents on this select board and on the Affordable Housing Trust Board have not seen fit to put that into their recommendations. And the neighbors would appreciate that inclusion of the 150-foot buffer. Thank you.
So, to your first point, Pete, I would suggest on the letter of support that we indicate that it was supported 2-0 with the third selectman recused, so, which is accurate. When I read it, I understand your sensitivity, Pete. You were recused, you didn't vote, there was a unanimous vote, but it was 2 out of 3. So my view is that would be fine.
no problem, we can put that, the views of the recused member are completely unknown to the Board of Selectmen. as well.
And Mike, you may have some comments, but to respond to your other piece, Pete, you know, every one of these projects that we have, it's the 40B, the whole concept of the state being able to override the zoning regulations of the town for purposes of promoting affordable housing has been something that really irks me, and as you know, I've been affected by it. Many people have been affected by it. The one thing I would say about all three of us is, because this is certainly not you've been in on some of these discussions for other projects, and certainly Medfield Meadows was my first exposure when I first got elected as a selectman, and there were 400 units, and that was clearly an issue. I think what all three of us have done with those projects as they've come up is, to the extent that abutters raise an issue, we've looked for a way to accommodate that issue. Right now, the Pound Street is one example of something that's still kind of floating out there in limbo, I guess. We haven't just simply given abutters whatever they wanted, but we've tried to give them as much as we can. And so in this particular case, we went through the cycle of basically providing more council, taking council on aging land and adding it so that the entire project could be moved farther away. So we went from something like 30 feet to 85 feet. We've included the provisions where feasible to try to get closer to that 150 feet. So speaking as one selectman on the board, never having particularly liked having to tell abutters that there has to, that are not happy with a 40B project near them, that it's going in anyway because it's in the interest of the town. The way I've looked at it is we have some laws that are pushing us in a direction. We have, because of that, some objectives of the town to achieve 40B housing. Within those priorities, if abutters want something and we can find a way to get them as much of it as we can, we try. In this instance, my feeling is that's what we did when we went through the drill to rezone, redesignate the land to give at least part of that. Now, I understand that's not what all of the abutters are going to be happy with. I would point out that of the buildings that are there, there's only a couple of them that actually encroach that close, and there's only a couple of the abutters that even are going to be affected by that. So I hear what you're saying, and I've heard some lengthy discussions from your neighbor about this as well. I can say I think we've tried to do it. We've tried to accommodate as much of it as sincerely as we can, but I think what your neighbors are looking for is one that probably would radically change the project because there wouldn't be room to do it. And so I think we've made the right decision here.
A couple thoughts in response to that, Mr. Murby. One is that in the typical 40B situation, like the one that affects you, it was an unfriendly 40B. The town had no choice as to how that one was going to come down, other than the town actually asked the developer to add a unit to it so that we could get into a safe harbor position, so that we went from 48 to 49 units. But that one, I mean, that one is about 700 feet from your house, so that there's a very big difference to this one. What is very different in this instance is that it is the town that is invoking the 40B under the LIP process at a time when the town is basically in a safe harbor. Well, we are in a safe harbor, and we're likely going to be in a permanent safe harbor by having 10% affordable housing. And so that the town is in fact using what is the developer's weapon against towns, but in this instance, it is the town using it against some of its own residents. And that's why we're asking for the 150 feet. The density next to our homes is going up to a matter of 4 to 5 times. We think the 150-foot buffer is a reasonable one. And if that were done, then, as I said, we have all stated on the meetings that we would support the project. At the moment, none of our neighbors do support the project that I'm aware of. I guess the other thing that I would say about it is that there are ways to get to the 150 feet, I think. The original proposal from the developer was for 20 units. The town asked him to add 4 units to that. Clearly, if you took out those 4 units, you'd have the 150 feet. I know that
buy them and tear them down, Pete.
Beg your pardon?
You'd always buy them and tear them down. Then you'd have your buffer.
Sure.
Yeah, Pete, the one other consideration for me on this one at least is that when we did the senior housing survey, I would be more sympathetic to what you're saying if this is just a straight up 40B, but this is actually a age-restricted 40B. When we did the senior survey, one of the 3 top locations that the seniors wanted to be was close to the COA. I can see it being a good situation for them, both because they're close to the COA and they're close to Kingsbury and they're close to the state hospital for that matter. So in terms of the options that we had there, that would be the one option that's there. Speaking personally, when we take a look at Hinckley North, I'm far more sensitive to not wanting to do something there that would be out of character. So if we were talking about that part of the property, I'd probably be more sympathetic to what you're talking about.
So I think that the first two choices on the survey were the seniors wanted to be in the downtown area or at the hospital. In fact, one of the proposals that the town now has for the hospital includes a lot of housing that would be suitable for seniors.
The third choice was by the COA. Those are the top three choices.
Yeah, but the primary ones were downtown or at the hospital.
The top three were all those were the top three choices. The fourth choice was some people wanted to be interspersed, but there was actually strong interest in all three of them.
And I think it may be an admirable goal to try to create some of this moderately priced housing for seniors who want to downsize in town. I'm not sure how many we're really going to get to take us up on that, or how many people are going to come from out of town to buy these. But if it gets built, then we'll find that out. My guess is that a lot of seniors in town won't pull the trigger and move to these, but we'll find out.
I mean, that's fair. We did a survey, we got results, and the survey results identified those three areas, and you could be right. I don't know. I would anticipate these will actually be kind of nice units in a good location.
And Mr. Marcucci, I would just respond to your comment saying that what I've noticed over the course of my career as an attorney is that people regard their home as their sanctuary, and that things that are done to change their home are very difficult to accept. And so that I don't think it's a specious concern for my neighborhood.
And I would say, Pete, if you think I have treated it as a specious concern, you've not been paying attention. I mean, this has been the focus of this project and the singular issue we have tried to address. And that is without any articulation by you or anyone else of what the actual harm is going to be to your neighbors, right? There's no assertion that there's going to be a shadow cast on somebody's house. There's no assertion that there's going to be extra water runoff coming into your neighborhood as a result of this that would be mitigated by the 150-foot buffer. And so all of the kind of things that when I'm trying to think about what's the actual harm, I think you could have a pretty good argument with the folks next to Medfield Meadows, which is about 10 feet apart. They do have a shadow. They do have kind of actual, tangible, articulable harms. And when I was trying to evaluate, and again, as I've said in communications with others of your neighbors, I'd always rather say yes. I like all of you folks. I'd like to say yes to you. I think the views you've articulated and the fact that people view their homes, and obviously this is not a change to anyone's home, it's a change to something near their home, have generally prevailed, right? Which is why housing prices are so high, which is why we have such great disparities in wealth, largely driven by housing policy between people of different races in our area. It's why it's very hard to build housing in greater Massachusetts, which redounds greatly to the benefit of people like us who own homes, right? And a lot of those policies are designed to prop up the values of the homes of the people that currently own them through adjustments to the market and artificial restraints in the market. And those artificial restraints serve good purposes. They're not all bad purposes. There's not some conspiracy behind them to do it, but I think we can't ignore the real world impact of this kind of policy. And so the 40B law and the LIP process and changes that the state further changes that are coming to this area of law are being made to try to provide a little bit of an escape valve. And I see the LIP process not as using the 40B law against the neighbors, right? I know that this is the normal rhetoric. This is the rhetoric that people trying to fight against new housing have used in the suburbs of Massachusetts for 40 or 50 years, that it's the developer against the town, it's the people, and I don't see this as using this against you. I realize it's against your wishes, it's against your desires, it's against your preferences. I understand that. But I see the LIP process as offering an opportunity to towns in the face of a state policy, a policy with a Commonwealth that wants to build more housing, that does through a blunt instrument of the 40B law, which I don't like either, right? I mean, I would much prefer it didn't exist. I'd much prefer that towns have 40 years ago adjusted their zoning codes to accommodate more housing for working class people than they have. And that hasn't happened. And so the state is using increasing leverage to try to find ways to effectuate what I think is an important moral policy goal, which is to make it possible for people who don't make six figures a year to buy a house and to live in a town with good schools and that they're safe and the kind of towns that people want to live in. I think it's an important policy goal. This is a tiny project, right? We've done other projects that do more to effectuate that worthy goal that than this one, but it is not a matter of saying we're going to use this against the people who don't want it. We're trying to create a little bit, again, 24 units. This is not going to move the needle, but try within the strictures the state provides to effectuate part of that goal and to achieve the goal that Gus has identified for senior housing. So I'm sorry that emotionally you feel like this is, we're fighting against you, we're imposing this on you, we're doing this against you. But I don't see it that way. I think I have certainly worked very hard to try to accommodate this concern. As the one comment I had in the agreement tonight was to go further in accommodating that concern. And again, as I said, I wish I've known some of your neighbors as long as I've been in town, and I'd love to be able to just say yes to everybody. And I just think ultimately, from the overall perspective of the town and our public policy and housing and generally, that this project, as described in the agreement, strikes the appropriate balance between the preferences of the neighbors and the policy objectives of a variety of constituencies in the town. And that's kind of what I see us trying to accomplish in the LIP process. And so I do feel sorry that you all see this as the town hostilely doing something to you. I'm reasonably confident that we didn't select this piece of property in effort to do anything against you or to hurt your neighbors or to find some way to stick it to folks. I mean, this is a logical place that a lot of people who have knowledge of housing policy and who have looked at land have said this is a logical place for this kind of development. And it fits in there nicely for the reasons that Gus says. And again, I'd much prefer just to say, yes, great, 150, that's terrific. I don't think I'd be serving the needs of the greater town if I did that. And I don't think I'd be serving the objectives of the town in trying to move forward in developing some additional affordable housing. Again, this isn't super affordable. It's more affordable than the average house in town, but it's a relatively modest project. And so I think that's where I come down on this. And I don't think I've treated it as a specious concern. I don't see it as a specious concern. I recognize that when things happen near people's houses, people get concerned about it. They're rightly concerned about it. I've never suggested the concerns are illegitimate. If I thought they were illegitimate, I wouldn't have tried to accommodate them at all. You could have built 24 units on the original piece of land without the Council on Aging. So if I thought it was a specious concern, I wouldn't have gone through the trouble of trying to make that happen, which I spent a lot of time trying to make that happen, and we did. And so I hope you don't perceive anything I've said as denigrating that particular concern. The fact that I think it's a legitimate concern is reflected in the agreement. And to the quote you read from the Massachusetts Appeals Court case, I think this is consistent with that. I don't think this is a deleterious use of this property. I don't think it's going to have any effect on the values of the property in your neighborhood. I don't think it's going to have any effect on the lives of the people in your neighborhood.
So, small project is what you call it. It's a big change for our neighbors because this land is zoned for 40,000 square foot lots. The town is putting 4 to 5 times that density next to our homes, and so that it's a big change for us.
Can I ask you a question, Pete?
Yes.
How would you articulate the harm to you of having 24 of these smaller units there as opposed to 5 larger units?
I think anybody in town that had a 40B project next to their house with density of 4 to 5 times the zoning would say that they were being harmed, Mike.
What is the harm? Do you think it's going to lower the value of the properties in your neighborhood?
It's going to change the quality of one's the life that one has.
How?
Well, the town has told us that our neighborhood is to be one house on basically an acre, and all of a sudden next door the town is going to be building 4 to 5 times that density. I think that's a big change.
No, but Pete, I mean, this is what I haven't. I think there isn't an answer, which is why I haven't gotten.
I mean, you don't. I think we differ, Mike, in that you don't see zoning as the promise of the town to what neighborhoods are going to look like. I see the zoning that the town has put forward as its promise to people that live in that neighborhood, that this is what your neighborhood is going to look like. Now the town is coming along and changing the density of that land substantially.
So in your view, as long as somebody in that neighborhood was there when the zoning can never change forever. So essentially zoning.
Town meeting can change the zoning.
period of time and it can never change, otherwise you're breaking a promise, that's your view?
Town meeting can certainly change the zoning. In this instance, it's a little bit anomalous because the town, in the form of the select board and the Affordable Housing Trust, is using the 40B statute to ignore the zoning and to put in this extra density of housing. The neighbors have said, we support the concept, we hope it works. We just would like a little bit of separation from the neighborhood that's built up on the 40,000 square foot lots from the one that is going to be built up on a fourth of an acre or a fifth of an acre lots.
So again, maybe I'm beating a dead horse. Is the harm then aesthetic? In other words, you're looking at houses that are closer together than the houses that are there now, that is a negative?
I think that anybody would tell you, Mike, that if somebody put density 4 to 5 times the zoning next to their home, that would change the quality of their life in their
But
home.
again, somebody may tell me that, and that is certainly something suburban people are programmed to say. But in some circumstances, the answer is, well, the density is going to lead to more traffic, right? There's more traffic in my neighborhood. This street can only take so many cars, right? That's not an issue here, right? There's no cut-throughs. The cars are all going to come onto Ice House Road. I haven't heard from anybody on Ice House Road or on West Mill saying that the added traffic is going to be a problem for them. And I don't think it would be. It's 24 senior houses, so it's unlikely to have an effect. You could have an effect on, stormwater runoff. You see, put in a denser project there. As a result of that, you're going to change the way the water goes. I could have water on my property. You could have an issue
Well, I
of
mean, there may be
shadows.
issues with that because I think the proposal asks to use the storm drainage that's already there that serves the existing properties, and that may not work, but I mean, I'm sure the engineers will let us know.
Right. And all I'm asking for, Pete, and what I think there isn't one, right? I mean, I get the aesthetic concern. You don't want to look at houses that are closer together than the houses you currently look at. And I don't ignore that. I think these houses are going to be nice looking. There's going to be a buffer of a fence. There's going to be trees. There's going to be a yard. I mean, they are going to be closer. And maybe looking at houses that are further apart is more aesthetically pleasing. But I think if we're going to, as Gus says, make this kind of a change to the project, I think it's got to be more than that kind of concern. And again, I don't regard it as specious. I don't regard it as irrelevant. If I regarded it as specious or irrelevant, we wouldn't have tried to address it. And I don't see how, and I have not had articulated either, how this additional 65 feet would ameliorate that, whatever that concern is, why that would be an improvement either. And so, just given that, I think if we were going to defer to this kind of concern in these projects as a matter of precedent, you could always raise this kind of concern. And again, they wouldn't be specious or illegitimate. They wouldn't be inappropriate to raise. I think they're appropriately raised. I think the neighbors should continue to raise them throughout the ZBA process to try to continue to increase the size of that buffer zone. I'm certainly hopeful, it'll be my preference, that as the engineering comes through, that you'll get what you want and everybody can be happy and everyone will support it at the end of it. I think just balancing the various equities and balancing the other pieces here, I can't see myself to go even further than we already have. And it's a balance of things. I understand from your perspective, and this is why you're recused, because you have an interest that is particular, right, to yourself, that we don't have that particular interest. And so I'm trying to balance that interest, which I think I've taken seriously, against the overall policy objectives we have as a board and as a town.
So, and I do thank you for what I understand was your work in terms of increasing the size of the property so that there could be more of a setback. It did increase in the number of units as well when that happened from the 20.
Well, the increase was requested before that. The increase was requested in the original Affordable Housing Trust meeting.
Oh, all right, I wasn't aware of that.
The request of the increase came from the Affordable Housing Trust to get the sixth affordable.
Okay. So I think that all of the people in the neighborhood are very appreciative of that addition of the extra land that allowed it to be pulled back a little bit more from the existing neighborhood.
And I'm not expecting appreciation for any of this. I'm just saying that
As
I've not been dismissive to it.
As an interested observer of the process, although I think that what would have been good and what I would commend to the town to do in the next instance that it does this sort of thing is before the project gets put into stone, to go out and talk to the neighborhood. In this instance, the town really never talked to the neighbors. And it would have been good to have a meeting where the town came to the neighborhood and said, this is what we're thinking. And then you could have heard from Meg Femino and Joe Sear and me and Deb and the other people, Dick Scolari, about what would work for us. And then we would have maybe, I mean, the last time I was talking to you about this, I offered to sit down with the developer and try to figure out a way to get to the 150 feet, and no one, the developer never took me up on that, so.
I think he did have a meeting with the neighbors, though. I thought he did.
That was before that suggestion. Yes, yeah, he was very nice. He did meet with us, yes. And we expressed the 150-foot desire to him at that point, too. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Let's see, we need each one at a time.
Yes.
I would suggest or recommend to you that if you're inclined to vote to approve the agreement with the one revision you noted, but as far as the actual signing, to put that off to allow us to double check and make sure we finalized and presented you with a clean document.
Okay, that's fine.
And your change on that was on the LDA.
It's in the LDA paragraph 4 and section 4, and then in the MOU, paragraph 3. Oh, Joe Sear would like to speak.
Okay.
Can you promote him, Nick? Sorry, Joe, if you have had your hand up for a while, I missed it. I apologize.
Yes, sorry, yeah, I just raised my hand. I just had a quick question, just maybe for a point of clarification. I know Gus mentioned if it was Hinckley North, it would be different. And I guess maybe my understanding is I'm not really clear on what exactly is Hinckley North. And then the other point is, what's different with Hinckley North than Hinckley South that makes it a little bit different to have different buffers?
There's probably a couple things that are different. One of the most important being the size of the land. My point there was that if we were there've been some discussions about various uses of Hinckley North. I believe there's approximately 2 acres. Mike, you probably even know that. It's around, I believe it's about 2 acres of developable land that's back there.
Well, it's not 2 acres of developable land, it's less than that.
It's less than 2 acres, okay. Oh,
It's on the, yeah, it's,
Okay.
I don't know what the, I mean, I think just from an engineering standpoint, I don't know what it might be 2 acres, the parcel size might be 2 acres, but it's not.
So Joe, it's something like that, it's around 2 acres. My point about that was that this particular development on Hinckley South is well located for the people that we're targeting it for as an age-restricted development. Personally, I think it's an appropriately sized project for what's there. Proximity to the COA, to the Kingsbury Club. There are lots of reasons why that seems to be an appropriate project for that place. My point was that putting something in Hinckley North, which would be right behind many people's houses, that would dump out onto Harding Street, I could see that I would be more sympathetic to not cramming as much as possible in there, just because of where it's located and the nature of the property. So it's not like, I think we just can throw concentrated projects anywhere. I think in this particular case, this is an appropriate project to go in there. The issue that you all have raised is an issue simply of how far away it starts. It's not the nature of it. I actually would object to some uses on Hinckley North because I think it would be a more intrusive kind of a thing for the people that actually live there. There's less room for things. There's less land to work with. There's less land. You don't have people dumping out to a completely different road.
There's very limited frontage, too.
There's limited frontage, yeah.
The issue with that is that the
Yeah,
actual land on, yeah.
It actually, the way it works right now, it will actually involve the town taking advantage of a right-of-way that's partially on someone's land. So it's not even just a question of being intrusive where it is. It would actually be using someone's private property by virtue of the right-of-way we have. So there's a lot of factors that have gone into my position on that one, some of which have to do with not making it a hassle for the people that live close by. I see that as being different than this. Not sure if that
Okay,
helps.
so
but
that's parcel B on page 18, is that right?
is that,
It's got 2.6 acres of upland.
Mark Sorrell is confirming, that's it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep.
And you can't get it from parcel A to parcel B? Is
It's a
that because
wetland.
there's
It's
wetlands
wetlands.
in between? Is
No,
that,
it's wetlands.
okay. Okay, Gus, thank you. Thanks for clarification.
Thanks, Joe.
Anything else, Joe?
No, that's all I had.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I think, appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. I move that we vote to approve the land disposition agreement and the memorandum of understanding for the Hinckley South project with the change to paragraph 4, section 4 of the land disposition agreement and paragraph 3 of the memorandum of understanding for the Hinckley South project to be made prior to signing.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. All right. And that is it for our
Do you want
agenda.
the next one? The support the Hinckley South project submittal?
Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry.
So I move that we vote to support the Hinckley South project submittal to the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development as a local initiative program project for a 24-unit, age-restricted, 62-plus development, subject to final purchase and sales agreement, and with the revision on the reported vote as 2-1, 2-0, with one selectman abstaining. Recused, not abstaining, recused. And authorize the chair to sign the LIP application and submit a letter of support to DHCD.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes as well. I think that is this. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You want to vote, Pete?
You can vote on this one, Pete. Good night, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Every once in a while on Zoom, my screen will go screwy on me. It does this thing at the bottom, and then I can't get to anything. So I can't, like I had all the minutes and I had the packet, and it's like I can't get to it. Because it goes, yeah, it's a video thing.